Evening and welcome to tonight's lockdown learning. My name is Bren Cullen. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at the Zionist Federation of Australia. Tonight is a special evening as we discuss the present and future state of Jewish communities around the world. It is therefore fitting that tonight's conversation is brought to you in partnership with the United Israel Appeal Australia, since the UIA and ZFA are close partners in everything we do in Australia. We have two guests this evening. The first is Yitzhak Bougie Herzog, who is chair of the executive of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Prior to this role, Bougie was a member of the Knesset for 15 years, which included a 5-year stint as leader of the Labour Party, as well as several ministerial posts, including housing and social services. Bush's family is no stranger to leading roles in the Jewish world. His father was the 6th president of Israel, and his grandfather was not only the first and I believe only person to serve as chief rabbi of two countries, but also served as the first chief rabbi of both of those countries, serving in the Irish Free State from 1922 and then in the Yishuv and later State of Israel from 1936. Bush is joined tonight by Stephen Lowy. Stephen is the chair of the World Board of Trustees of Keren-Hayesod UIA and is only the second Australian to fill that role. Stephen is also a principal of LFG, the private investment business and family office of the Lowy family group. For over 30 years before its sale, he was an executive director of Westfield Corporation. He is the chair of One Market Limited, a director of the Lowy Institute, a director of the Lowy Medical Research Institute, and president of Co-op Club in Sydney. Tonight, Bougie and Stephen will be in conversation with the president of the Zionist Federation of Australia and my boss, Jeremy Leibler. So with no further ado, I'll hand you over to Jeremy.
Thanks, Bren, for that introduction. And Bougie and Stephen, thank you for joining us tonight. For this, what I hope will be a relaxed conversation between the three of us, and of course we'll take some questions from the audience. So audience, please post your questions and they'll be filtered through to us. I think just to frame the conversation a little bit, for me the discussion tonight is really about connecting the dots. And what I mean by that is, you know, when I took on this role in the ZFA about a year and a half, 18 months ago, what became very clear to me early on in the process was the role that our relationship with the Jewish Agency, with the Sochnut, the role that plays in terms of the strength of this community. We all know, and Bougie and Stephen know this well, that Australia is one of the strongest Jewish communities in the world, most passionately Zionist, but we're small in number. And so how is it that this community sort of manages to really defy some of the global trends, although we have our own challenges? And I genuinely believe that part of the reason for that is that are those dots that connect us to the Jewish Agency. And of course, the conduit, the vehicle to the Sochnut, which extends to the State of Israel and the rest of the Jewish world, is our relationship with Keren-Hayesod UIA. That is the vehicle. And most of the community don't quite appreciate the extent of this. And so what I want to do is I want to delve into the sort of perspective that each of you have, which is really a global perspective of the Jewish world. And we can double down on Stephen, who also has a perspective on Australia, and talk a little bit about how the Jewish world is coping and responding to the very difficult times in which we are living. So perhaps to start, Bougie, maybe with you, we can start. Maybe you can give us a bit of an overview from your perspective, how the sort of the good and the bad, what are the challenges in the Jewish world in the current times? And are there any sort of green shoots, any positive signs that you can see?
So first of all, it's a great honor and pleasure to speak to all of you, dear friends of the Australian Jewish community, especially to ZFA. Thank you very much, my good friend Jeremy Leibler, and I'm especially honored to appear together with Stephen Lowy, who's the world chairman of the board of trustees of Keren-Hayesod. Just to put everybody on the same wavelength in terms of what are all these names about, I'll just make it clear. Theodor Herzog, when he founded the Zionist movement, he founded the World Zionist Organization. That organization still exists. And actually ZFA is an affiliate of the World Zionist Organization. And that organization is the proponent of the whole Zionist idea. Of course, in order to implement the Zionist ideal, the national home of the Jewish people, first he established the KKL, Keren-Hayesod, JNF, and then they established Keren-Hayesod in order to raise funds for the redemption of the land by Keren-Hayesod. And following the Balfour Declaration in 1917 and the victory of the Allied forces in World War I, the Jewish Agency was actually founded in order to bring about the creation of the State of Israel, the Sochnut. And in fact, the Jewish Agency fulfilled this great cause. I sit now, I'm broadcasting to you from my room in Jerusalem, which was the room where David Ben-Gurion sat in for 2 decades and led to the creation of the State of Israel and its independence. So there's a sense of history here, which really has engulfed all of us together. And of course, through evolutionary processes, today Keren-Hayesod is the international arm of Zionism worldwide. And the Jewish Agency is the convener and uniter of the Jewish people worldwide. And we are the biggest Jewish organization in the world. And as such, work with the ZFA and the communities worldwide to keep them all intact, strongly working together with Israel at heart. So this is our day-to-day objective and goal. We bring Aliyah. This is what we were commissioned to do when Israel was founded. The ingathering of the exiles. We brought in about 4 million Olim to date. This year, 35,000. In the Corona, well over 1,200. And we unite and deal with the needs of the Jewish people, their identity, continuity, and the centrality of Israel, and representing the Jewish people in Israel. Now, when you ask me about the Corona set us, kind of steered us away from the main course, but not really. Because what we found during the Corona crisis is that there are many communities around the world who have been basically frozen, paralyzed, even collapsing. And this is kind of an exposure of the situation of the Jewish world worldwide. I can say that because you are a blessed community with enormous strength, resilience, and leadership, you can look on other communities around the world and see how they fell apart, literally fell apart. Take, for example, Italy. Italy has 22 communities with 20,000 Jews. Historical communities actually competing with Athens on who's the oldest community on earth. But when the Corona struck, the communities basically were paralyzed. So much so that even now, 2 months after the crisis, 2.5 months, we supplied food parcels to members of the communities through a whole fundraising campaign, which we are working with Keren-Hayesod. So if I can say what the challenge was, is how do we help communities at risk? And for that matter, together with Keren-Hayesod and Jewish Federations of North America, we established a special emergency loan fund, but loans without interest to communities. To date, we allotted $7 million from this fund to about 40 communities or so around the world who have found that the school cannot open, that the synagogue is totally with no income and ability to function once it emerges. The need of the old age centers and the social services are humongous and so forth and so on, and they needed oxygen. And this is what we as the Jewish Agency did together with our allies. Another 2 issues, and then I will pass on the floor. One is Aliyah. There is a silver lining in all of this situation whereby Aliyah continued unlimitedly, of course, bearing in mind objective reasons of flights and travel and quarantine. All Olim were put in quarantine, and we took care of all of them throughout the days until they were able to come out. None of them fell ill. And secondly, we have the biggest social housing enterprise in Israel called Amigur. And in that, the biggest old age enterprise in the country with about 800 old age impoverished, new immigrants, Holocaust survivors, and old age veterans who have no income or low income earners. And we accept one corona case, which came healthy at the end. We had no corona because of excellent management, but with the support of the Jewish world in helping these Jews in need in the corona times, we managed to overcome this crisis as well.
And Stephen, maybe can you talk, because I want to come back to the issue of Aliyah in a minute, because I think we're seeing some really interesting sort of trends. Certainly in Australia, we've seen a spike in Aliyah, in interest in Aliyah. But Stephen, you know, in the sort of food industry that everyone's talking about, you know, farm to table at the moment. So if we sort of take that analogy for a minute, because I think this is really important. Farm to table, draw that analogy to UAA, KH, the Sochnut, and all of these very important challenges in the Jewish world. Talk to us about when someone writes a check in Australia, sort of where does it go, and what's the sort of, you know, impact that it's having, and what are you seeing in your role in terms of the challenges? I mean, Buji referred to, you know, examples of Italy, and, you know, I remember a couple months ago at the very beginning of this crisis, you know, we didn't know how it would affect Australia, and, you know, thank God we've come out of it so far very well. But I think many of us here that don't have visibility on what is going on, particularly in some of the European Jewish communities, I think it's very important to hear the challenges that they're facing and also what role we can play, because that's fundamentally, I think, our role as a Jewish community, being part of this global Jewish community. We have a responsibility to also play a role in helping those communities. So Stephen, maybe you can comment on that for us.
Sure, Jeremy, thank you. It's really, to echo Buji, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here. Jeremy, thanks for hosting this. I mean, the partnership that we have together within Australia is unique and strong. The partnership that Keren-Hayesod has with the Jewish Agency goes back 90 and 100 years that Buji has spoken about, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you, Buji. We work very well together. We speak much on many of these topics, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to the Australian Jewish community, particularly me being Australian, and following in the footsteps of Jeremy's father, Mark, as only the two Australians to be in the position of chairman of the World Board of Trustees over 100 years, and this year is 100 years, as everybody knows. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think, Jeremy, and I'm glad Buji started the way he did, because I think he can frame the whole discussion today, particularly as it relates to ZFA, but also to UAA. You asked the question of how is it affecting the various countries around the world. I mean, I'll just remind everybody, as Buji did, that Keren-Hayesod represents over 40 countries and 60 campaigns in the diaspora. So you've got America with, what is it, about 6 million Jews, Israel with 6 million Jews, and there's almost 3 million Jews in the rest of the world. And that's the world that Keren-Hayesod is responsible for. And Keren-Hayesod, together with the Jewish Federation North America, are strong partners and funding and financial partners of the Jewish Agency. And no doubt we'll talk about that. I'm sure Buji and I will talk about that, and particularly in relationship to this farm to table. I've never heard farm. I've heard farm to table when it comes to restaurants, but not when it comes to Keren-Hayesod. But maybe I'll use that in the future, Jeremy. So thank you. I think the difference with this crisis is that it's affecting the diaspora in many cases more than it's affecting Israel. You know, we've always been used to rallying together. Jews are very good at rallying together when we're under threat, and particularly we've all shared the many threats that Israel has gone through. But this time Israel's under threat, the diaspora is under threat, but many countries are under more threat than Israel is under. And so our campaigns in Italy, in France, in Spain, I mean, even England, there's more Jews who've died in England and died in France than have died in Israel. This is an unbelievable statement to make. You have other campaigns such as South Africa, you know, unbelievably problematic right now. And of course, Australia is a great beneficiary of the Aliyah, in a sense, from South Africa to Australia. It's been unbelievably strong for Australia, and it's weakened the community in South Africa enormously. The new wave of problem is really in South America. Brazil is staggering problems. One of our fellow board members on Keren-Hayesod is the head of our Budget and Finance Committee. His name's Abrao Lowenthal, a very strong partner of mine. He lives in Sao Paulo, and we speak regularly, and he tells me about the horrific issues going on in Brazil right now. We're all seeing it play out every day on these, world meters and these meters that we look at every day of the corona crisis. But you can flow that on to Argentina and Chile, and of course, Venezuela has been a basket case for a long time. So there are many campaigns that are struggling deeply, and I'm sure Buji, will have an opportunity to speak about how what the Jewish Agency is doing about that in partnership with Jewish Federation of North America and Keren-Hayesod. You asked me about the farm to table stuff. Well, to be very, very simple about it, the vast majority of funds that Keren-Hayesod raises for its collective go to the Jewish Agency. So to bring that back to an Australian context, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, the vast majority of those funds that are raised are collected in the individual cities. They are sent directly to Keren-Hayesod's office, and they're effectively passed through to the Jewish Agency for the specific purposes of focusing on Aliyah, focusing on the social needs, and Buji spoke about Amigur is right in the sweet spot of an area that Keren-Hayesod focuses on. Another one is Youth Futures. Another one is the Youth Villages. Another one is the Netta project. We've all heard of these projects, but these are specific projects. In most cases, they are administered by the Jewish Agency, but they are funded to a large extent by Keren-Hayesod and also the Jewish Federation of North America in partnership with the Israeli government. Essentially, that's how the Jewish Agency is funded. So our job as fundraisers for the needy in Israel and Aliyah is really, our job is to do that in the most efficient manner, make sure that we have a very efficient cost base. So the majority of the dollars that we raise end up to the beneficiaries in Israel. And that's a very clear responsibility we have, and one that we are particularly focused on now in the eye of the coronavirus crisis.
And so, Stephen, Aliyah is a really interesting one because sort of at the early stages of this crisis, we had conversations here because we manage Aliyah in Australia nationally. And, I thought sort of, Aliyah numbers they're going to fall off a cliff. You can't go, you can't leave. And then suddenly we started with the trickle, and then suddenly we had a very significant increase in the number of inquiries, and very serious inquiries of people saying, I want to go, and we want to go ASAP. When can I get on a plane? And of course, we're having challenges, at the moment with the Australian authorities because there's a travel ban. But I found that really interesting, and I don't have any data as to why or how. But here you have in Australia where our economy in relative terms is still pretty strong. We've got our challenges. The number of cases of corona is very much under control relative to the rest of the world, and yet we had this increase. And it sort of struck me that maybe perhaps from a place like Australia, where it's an Aliyah by choice, it's not a country in distress. Maybe these global health pandemics sort of cause people to sort of pause their lives and sort of reflect on what's fundamentally important to them and where they want to be and where they want to build the rest of their lives. Maybe that's one of the reasons, but I'd be very interested to hear from either of you as to what you're seeing in the rest of the world. And I don't know, maybe I like to be a bit of an optimist, and I wonder whether or not we can take some of the good bits that come out of this crisis and use them in the way in which we approach things like promoting and marketing Aliyah in the future once this health crisis has subsided.
Okay, so first of all, we assume that there will be a major wave of Aliyah. And we project a wave of Aliyah between 100,000 people to 250 in the next 3 to 4 years. That's a very big rise in Aliyah, and especially Aliyah of young professionals, because we see the calls that we get worldwide we have a global center that gets all these calls in about 8 different languages, and we see the sharp rise in inquiries. Now, I do agree, you know, human behavior is that at a certain moment when you're in a lockdown, you're under pressure, you say to yourself, okay, I want something else. But one has to assume that there are communities where it will be much more apparent than Australia, which offers an attractive alternative to people, despite the enormous love of Israel in Australia. Take, for example, France. So in France, it's a community of 400,000 Jews. Okay, that's like 5% of Israeli population. In Israel, you had 260 or 280 cases of mortality, unfortunately. But in the French Jewish community, of 5% of that size, there's about 1,500 to 2,000 deaths. Okay, that's a crazy number. And that makes a huge impact. Same goes for Britain. Britain, at a given moment, the Jewish community in Britain at some point was 5% of the total mortality cases in the whole of the United Kingdom, whilst their percentage in the population is teeny weeny in relative terms. So this caused a major psychological impact on many people who say to themselves, look, Israel seems to have taken the right decisions, is emerging as in the balance between Israel and diaspora, emerging as a strengthened country, very good medical system, attractive place to live in addition to our love of Zionism, Israel, etc., we want to come and move to Israel. Now the problem is, of course, technicalities. What we enabled Aliyah was Aliyah which was already pre-approved before the crisis. Usually actually Aliyah that goes directly to apartments which were pre-leased. Now, because there's no physical interviews, we have moved with the government of Israel into interviews by Zoom, and then in some additional information that is required by the Israeli authorities. But all in all, we assume we will see the new wave of Aliyah starting as of early July. Now, in respect to the issue itself, we also brought in Olim from Ethiopia. Last week, I received a plane load of Olim from Ethiopia, together with our newly appointed Minister of Absorption. She is an Ethiopian-born Ola at age 4, Pnina Tamano Shata. For me, this was one of the most moving moments, because I was looking at her and looking at the little children coming down the plane and saying to myself, one day there will be big shots in the country as well, which is the great story of Israel. And of course, now the next frontier that we will witness is Latin America, because Latin America is going through a very severe corona, but also Argentina has major financial crisis looming over its political and economic situation. And finally, South Africa, as Stephen mentioned correctly, South Africa has been under enormous pressure because of the devaluation of the rand, in addition to corona, and the fact that they're not getting any government assistance at all. So they have to pay for everything, from schools to security to social services and all, and they are under very heavy pressure. So all of this will move. Also United States and other places, we will see, in my mind, following the United States havoc that we're seeing now, we will see many more Olim from North America.
Interesting.
I think
It's quite fascinating, Stephen. Yeah.
Maybe just to add to that, I guess, Bridget, your ears will prick up when I talk about anti-Semitism and the focus that Jewish Agency has on that. But clearly, some of the countries that we've spoken about with the rise of anti-Semitism, I think that combined with how Bridget talked about Israel, would clearly be a reason for French Jews, German Jews, Russian Jews, other countries in Europe that feel under threat, and again, the Jewish Agency focuses on this together with many of the local communities. But notwithstanding that, there's a lot of Jews that feel threatened and want to come to Israel because of that.
Yeah, that is a very good point, unfortunately, but history teaches us that the Jews are always the ones to be blamed. Originally, in many countries, it were the Chinese in this crisis, but after it relaxed, the Jews came up again to be number 1 or 2. And we see a very big rise of anti-Semitic rhetoric on websites and on social networks. And we saw it after the mortalities and rise of corona cases in Brooklyn with the Haredi community. We see it, and we saw desecration of synagogues last night in LA, 2 nights ago in Montreal. We see it in Alabama. We saw it in Europe too. So yes, we, as people will come out of the crisis, we assume an increase in anti-Semitic attacks, unfortunately, which calls for alert of communities, but you're absolutely right, Stephen. It will also impact the situation of Aliyah. So Aliyah is on our shoulders, and we are approaching the Israeli government to carve out a national plan of bringing over Olim, because remember, still 25% of Israelis are unemployed or in furlough, and the government will have to build with us a plan to be able to absorb these Olim. But usually also, you know, Aliyah is a blessing, and we never said no to Aliyah. On the contrary, always opened our gates.
You know, Buji, let me ask you this, and I ask this more as a sort of ideological question than as a sort of political one. You know, you've got 25% of Israelis out of work. Even before Corona, while, you know, the economy was strong and Israel was a leader in many fields, Israel has its challenges. How does one sort of philosophically justify or rationalize the expenditure of, you know, very significant funds by, you know, Israeli government, and I say that broadly, on supporting diaspora Jewry? And it does. You know, we see it in the form of, you know, Masar, of Taglit, and for those watching, you know, Taglit is Birthright, Masar are sort of, you know, long-term gap year programs over 4 months, all of which are supported, you know, by the Jewish Agency, Keren-Hayesod, and the government of Israel. How does one, you're not in government now, but, you know, how does one sort of turn around and, well, how do I decide where that money goes, and how do I justify it, frankly?
Yeah, it's a legitimate question. It's saying, the poor of your city are first, and I'm asked about it a lot in Israel by the media, but let me first explain. We have to understand, remember, I mean, you know, I don't have to explain to you that what keeps the gist of Jewish life is communal life. And that's why I say minyan is a great idea. It's not just a gathering of 10 human beings. It's just a gathering of a community. And communal life has been struck badly and hurt badly by the coronavirus, because no synagogues, no schools, no kindergarten, no events, no JCCs, nothing. This is what kills communities. And the question is then, how do communities pick up? And I think in recent years, it's more and more apparent that Jewish communities from all over the world have gained support from the Israeli government, because the Israeli government came to realize that it has an extra responsibility for Jewish life abroad and for the communities, or Jewish communities abroad, and they do it through the Jewish Agency. And it's actually turns the wheel, meaning you bring kids on Masa to Israel, you build them as leaders in the communities, but you also encourage potential Aliyah. The whole immersive experiences, which are going to be hurt, by the way, at this stage, they're deeply hurt by the coronavirus crisis. We need to find alternatives to them, or take into account summer camps. I have 1,500 counselors ready to go out to North America only, let alone other places around the world. In the summer, they're all being canceled. So what's the alternative? And therefore, I think I find personally a more enormous interest by Israelis about what's going on in the communities abroad. And it fell on fertile ground. When we came forward with our fund, it fell on fertile grounds. While the government didn't yet join us in the fund. It expressed interest to join us in the fund, but also has worked with us on security of communities, on education, which is going to be a big issue. There's a new minister of diaspora affairs, and she expressed clear commitment to helping Jewish education abroad. So all of this is something we have to have sink in. But not only that, we also came forward on behalf of World Jewry to help Israeli society. We were the first and only ones so far to help the Israeli nonprofit sector, the voluntary sector, together with Keren-Hayesod and JFNA, and a social bank called Ogen, to give loans to NGOs who became totally paralyzed as well. The major social services in Israel were built by diaspora Jewry, by World Jewry, and therefore they have a vested interest. We have helped and, of course, mobilized to assist, as we said, old age people, poor people, the youth villages that we run, and so forth and so on. So we did not neglect the needs of the Israeli society as well in this crisis.
Yeah. I suppose, to sort of draw a business analogy, you know, when you go through a crisis, it's not the time to stop investing for growth. And, you know, I can tell you, at least in Australia, there is, you know, the Jewish world, the state of Israel gets a return on that investment in terms of Jewish identity and levels of connectedness. I mean, so Stephen, sort of in that vein, you know, what I'm seeing in my professional life is, you know, businesses that were sort of went into this crisis with challenges or, you know, lack of quality management, whatever it was, they are the ones that, you know, may not get through it at all. And the ones sort of that went in strong, with strong foundations, with clarity of vision,
Sure.
They may well come out of this stronger. And so maybe from your perspective, both sort of your, you know, broader organizational experience, but your sort of, you know, understanding the community, what do you think some of our own local communal organizations, fundraisers, not fund, you know, schools, everything sort of in the gambit, and sort of any key lessons or thoughts that you think, you know, hopefully they'll come out, they'll take out of this to make them stronger on the other side?
Sure. Well, I can sort of speak at a, you know, global level and an Australian level from that perspective. One of the major focuses that I have now through the crisis, apart from obviously the fundraising side, and to the extent there are communities and individuals within communities that remain to have financially strong, have the capacity to continue to give, well, we have a major responsibility to remind them of that. The issues that Buji spoke about have not gone away. In fact, Aliyah is growing. Amigur programs, youth programs, all of these issues have not gone away. In fact, they've become under more stress, particularly the social side of what the Jewish Agency does. So we've got that responsibility, but we've also got a responsibility to do it, and I may have mentioned that before, in a responsible manner. Governance of organizations, cost side of organizations. I think that one of the things will come out of this, and I'd like this to be the case. I mean, I've been here just over a year. I've got no baggage. I've come into the role with very much a business mindset. I have the benefit of leading large organizations over very long periods of time. And I come into the role with somewhat of a organizational mindset and efficiency mindset, because I think we have a responsibility to two parties. We have a responsibility to the donor, that the funds they're giving, the vast majority of those are ending up in the right place. And we have a responsibility to the beneficiary. The vast majority of the funds are getting to the beneficiary through efficient sources. I strongly believe in that. We Jews are blessed with many causes and many organizations, globally and globally and domestically. And I think that we have a responsibility to stand above that. And it's maybe somewhat controversial, but I don't mind being controversial, because it drives a discussion, it drives a dialogue. There are many causes that are actually good causes that are very poorly run, or they're small causes with a big overhead, so a very small percentage of what they actually raise actually gets to the beneficiary that the donor thinks. So I would be very strong on issues of transparency and governance that actually lead to more efficiency in how we raise funds. We probably need fewer charitable organisations, and those that are more focused. Not necessarily that the beneficiaries of those small organisations should miss out, but there's no doubt it can be done in a much more efficient way. And all these organisations, from a lay perspective, they're run by very, very good-hearted people who are doing it for a very good cause and for a very good purpose. But that often gets mixed up in should the organisational structure be what it is, because if it changes and we group together with a bunch of others, we could do this a lot more efficiently. And I am sure that will need to come out of this, because one of the negatives out of the economic pressures will be pressure on donations, and that will therefore there's a pressure on expenses, and this is how the flywheel sort of works. So I think, Jeremy, I would be a strong proponent domestically within Australia to do that, and globally with many organisations. It's very complex what I'm talking about, but I think like Bushy's doing now with the Jewish Agency, tackling many long-standing norms that are no longer relevant, and we need to turn those on our head. I would say the same thing about many of the smaller charitable organisations. I have no doubt that Keren-Hayesod will come out of this stronger. The needs are not going away. The needs are only getting stronger. And we are, you asked me to think about one of the positives. One of the positives that I see coming out of this is a deep connection between the diaspora and sharing these responsibilities. In a weird way, Zoom or whatever mechanism you use for video conference is bringing us much closer together. Those that we're working very efficiently, Bushy and I, together with our colleagues in the United States, extremely efficiently on a weekly basis. And we never really did it like that. So I think it's bringing us with new mechanisms how to communicate that I think we will take these on after things settles down as well.
Interesting.
But what you have outstanding leadership in the two of you and other leaders in the Australian Jewish community are incredible, and I think that's the strength. My analysis about communities that are weak and strong starts with leadership. If you build a strong leadership, a lot of things get in line.
So I want to move to talk a bit more about the sort of Israel diaspora relationship with Australia, but more broadly as well. It's an issue that I spend a lot of my time thinking about and reading about. And we've also got from the audience here quite a few questions about the Israel-Australia sort of relationship. Let me just frame it first. I'm constantly sort of in a bit of a dilemma in my own mind as to, what are the source of the challenges? On the one hand, the data that we have from Gen 17 tells us that 19 or 18 to 29-year-olds of all of the age groups in Australia have the highest levels of self-identification as Zionists, connection to Israel than any other age cohort. Now, that's a statistic that if you compare it to the United States, for example, where it's quite the opposite, that's quite amazing, really. Now, at the same time, we do have declining numbers in Masa participation. Now, that is connected to cost, but it's not the only reason. And so I suppose, I think, the US is different. I think it's a different Jewish community. Daniel Gordis has written a book relatively recently called We Stand Divided, Bushy, which I'm sure you've seen, but if you haven't, you must read it because I think it's an outstanding book. But it got me thinking a lot about what's the equivalent? What are the drivers in Australia? And I don't know the answer. I don't profess to have all of the solutions. But on the other hand, on one hand, we have this cohort of young people that are defying the odds and the trends that we see around the world in terms of identification with Israel. Yet we are seeing a downward trend in Masa participation, which is the key to that leadership that Bushy refers to. Getting kids to Israel is the key. We know that the data is there. It's beyond. It can't be argued with. It's very clear the best way to ensure Jewish continuity, Jewish identity is getting kids to Israel. What are you seeing around the world, Bushy, in terms of this tension? There are obviously major challenges in the United States, but even elsewhere, what are you seeing?
So clear to us that the communities will first focus internally, and it took time for them to relax a little bit, because at first there was a major hysteria that saying, you know, let's leave Israel aside now, focus only on the community. Now more and more communities realize that the whole connection with Israel actually serves the community, serves the ability to deliver a message that is full of content to the members of the communities, especially the younger people that are that are in need of content that serves the ability to be full-fledged member of the community. We do realize there will be a weakening of the streams of incomers for Masa and Taglit this year because of travel, but I must say that we have a surplus of requests from students all over the world to come for a semester, you know, towards the end of the year, because of part of their academic year has been stopped. So it's kind of it balances itself off. But in, let's say, the next, it is assumed until September there will be not much Masa activity and no birthright activity. Masa, though, was the first and only operator to receive permit from the Israeli government to bring in youngsters. They will have to be in quarantine, but they're the only ones who got it. And I think that will be an anchor to be able to bring them forward to Israel and start picking up the wheels. The other issue is, of course, what's the alternative when you don't have an immersive program? And we're working on a whole bunch of content products that will be virtual, from virtual reality to educational projects. Remember, the first thing we did in the crisis was an Idan Reichel concert where we had 1 million people view it. And that was showed us how much this equipment we're on right now, this Zoom and webinars and computers, how we can use it to connect our people. So we must not leave a vacuum. We must connect our people together. And we are looking for ways and means to do it in a productive and successful way.
Jeremy, to bring it slightly home, I guess, you know, the very strong Year 10 programs, I believe they're as strong in Melbourne as they are in Sydney, and they're a fantastic program. There's also been a lot of support put behind those programs, and the participation has grown enormously. There may be some correlation between the strength of that and maybe the decline of Masa. I don't know, but you're probably in a better position to examine that. But any way they get there, whether it's through AST or Masa or some other programs, is as Bushi says, the criticalness of the immersion is there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, and look, I think the Year 10 programs definitely have played a role in those strong levels of identification. Now, whether or not they have taken away from Masa, you know, that's still up in the air, and we're actually commissioning Monash University to actually undertake some proper studies to see if there is that correlation. My own instinct, I think that Israel programs at any age should actually do the opposite, and I believe that having a whole bunch of kids going, you know, most of the kids in Year 10, Jewish and non-Jewish schools, go to Israel, it should increase participation. So there's another chink in the chain there. And I think that, I think in Australia, perhaps it's a little bit of, you know, a little bit of apathy. I think there is a natural in the heart. I think our schools, our youth movements do a very good job at instilling that emotional connection. And then I think when you finish school, what's lacking is a more meaningful, deeper connection to cause them to want to grow as a Jew. And I think that's the challenge. And the way to address it, in my view, is to focus on things like Jewish literacy. And what I mean by Jewish literacy, I don't mean that they need to be able to pick up a page of Talmud and read it fluently, although that would be very nice too. But something like Hebrew language, and Buji, I know this is something that you've spoken about in the past, and many others as well that talk a lot about the Israel diaspora relationship. well, how can we expect the diaspora in Israel to be on the same page, to engage, if we're actually speaking different languages?
Well, so actually our program on the Hebrew language is progressing nicely. And we are working with a whole team of linguistic experts, because what we want to is to build a program that deals with engagement, not necessarily learning the whole language that we've been trying for ages and ages, for good and for bad, but seeing how we can connect young people on engagement with a smaller vocabulary. In terms of the experiences, it's very important to note that actually the world trend is to look into teen travel, and you're doing it anyway from Australia. You're the biggest experts in this, I must say, but it's becoming like the buzzword in America, and we are talking to the Jewish Federations of North America and to the government of Israel to see how we can enlarge the scope of all the travel and experiences to Israel. In the interim, we are developing a lot of programs whereby we can kind of give the taste. And that is why we have an arm called Makom, which develops beautiful content, and many other programs which gave a lot of kind of taste for, as you mentioned, some Yiddishkeit in a modern way, packaged in a modern way. Last week, Stephen Lowy attended a major conference which I chaired together with our Minister of Diaspora Affairs, of 30 major Jewish global organizations who are regional and global, to tackle the main challenges of the Jewish people following COVID-19. The first was community. How does community function now? The second was resources. We all understand what I'm talking about. The third was education. Really, what will happen to Jewish education? And this, of course, has many, many facets to it. The fourth is leadership and spirit and hope, which something which we found badly affected in many communities worldwide. And that's why I say we should at least count our blessings and look forward and be the leaders in spreading a message to the world that we are here there to support Jewish life wherever it is. And finally was security and security and anti-Semitism, which is something very impactful now in many communities. So on the education side, you're right. We are trying to find tools to reach as many Jews as possible and give them Jewish content. And I must tell you, before Shavuot, I was like on a roadshow of every hour, another Zoom or webinar of thousands and thousands of people of all sorts of tikkun, not Leil Shavuot, but tikkunei Shavuot, all over, because people are yearning for good content.
So, we've got, I'm just looking at sort of the comments that have come through, and
so go ahead, read them out.
So they're interesting. There are a lot of comments, some about youth, saying that youth are not engaged or connected to Israel as much, which I think sort of the data just doesn't support that. And but that's a view that someone's sharing here. There are also a lot of questions about younger people participating or not participating in gap year programs. So Bushi, let me ask you this, because rather than read out on the questions, because there's a similar theme. Can you give us your elevator pitch? So for all of those, if they're parents of kids that are in year 11 or year 12 and thinking of going on a Masa Mishna program, or they are the kids themselves watching now, give us your elevator pitch. Why is it important, in a nutshell, for Australian Jewish kids who have had, many of whom, at least 50% of whom, have gone through 12 years of a Jewish day school, many of whom have been to Israel on a year 10 program for, anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. Why is it important that they go for their gap year before they start university to Israel, instead of, experiencing Europe or going to the Greek islands or whatever it is?
Well, I can make a long speech, but I will try to be as focused as possible. So first of all, a word about history. In 1941, David Ben-Gurion visited Australia. He came on a ship because since he couldn't come from America to Palestine, Yeah, because he couldn't come from America to Palestine because of the war. He went through the Pacific and got into New Zealand and Australia. Even Rabbi Freilich from Perth told me his father wrote a memoirs about it. His father was a great Zionist leader about Ben-Gurion's arrival, and I just saw it in another biography of Ben-Gurion. And think they came, did they know where the world will go? In a way, the Australian Jewish community perhaps felt they're the last Jews on earth. And all of a sudden, I mean, Australia was always there in the beginning. My uncle Abba Ibn was working with Doc Evett on the support of Australia, of Israel. And I will always remember when I came as minister, Israel celebrated 60, and how awed and emotional I was to look at your parliament where prime minister and leader of the opposition compete on the love of Israel. It was really impressive. And that's the greatness of Australia and still is. But the problem is when youngsters who have been well educated come to college, they're faced with a whole barrage, a whole campaign trying to undermine the right of the Jewish people for their own self-determination. And this goes strong with some terrible voices, also on your campuses and in many other campuses. And there's nothing like seeing Israel the way it is, nothing. And not only that, it is almost metaphysical. When one gets to Israel, emotionally, he feels something is impacting his being. It's a very deep thing, and people can ask questions and face reality and explain what they've seen. And compare yourself to another community. We mentioned the South African Jewish community with all its problems, but that community has been faced in the recent generation with a huge Israel hate. And they kind of, because they didn't have enough Israeli experiences, they find themselves at times totally perplexed. I'm not saying that Israel makes life easier for anybody, but still it's an incredible country, really incredible country. And one of a kind, and it is the safe haven of Jews and a source of pride. So I absolutely, utterly encourage you as a friend of the Australian Jewish community, and I vividly recall my initial visit when I just started my position 2 summers ago in Australia. I send your kids on team travel to Israel to enjoy the experience. It will impact their life forever.
And Stephen, something that you've spoken a lot about in our conversations and when I've heard you speak is this notion of actually responsibility. How do you think, and we're going to finish up in a few minutes maybe on this theme. I think it's a nice topic to finish up on, but from your perspective, what role does sort of a sense of responsibility, you know, we can talk about the beautiful Tel Aviv beaches, we can talk about high tech, we can talk about all these wonderful things, but I've always believed that if we start marketing Israel, if we start marketing GAPI programs simply as a tourist destination, we've missed the point. And I think young people, you know, we don't give them enough credit today. Yes, Gen Y, and they're on Instagram and Facebook and all of these things all the time. But just like generations before them, they're perfectly capable of assuming responsibility for themselves and their people. So what role do you think responsibility plays in that decision for parents and children?
I think it plays a huge part, Jeremy. You have heard me speak about it because I probably speak about it every time I'm speaking in my sort of role as Keren-Hayesod. But my duties and my sense of that started very young. We were in our early 20s, we were young married, and we were already part of young leadership. My personal experience, many people know my father's story, but the Jewish Agency, through funds raised through Keren-Hayesod, really provided the means for him to get out of Europe after the Holocaust and get to Israel. And then the Jewish Agency created the youth villages that people like my dad, other boys and girls who came out of Europe, and that effectively saved that generation of youth post-Holocaust. And so I think any of us who are descendants of that, and many of us in Australia are descendants of that. My understanding is Australia has the largest per capita population outside of Israel. who have immediate ties post-Holocaust, and so I think Australian Jews have a deep sense of responsibility. As Boji said, we happen to live in a country where both sides of politics are arguing about who loves Israel more. That still exists today. So don't only go back to 1948, it still exists today. And we're blessed to live in a country that we do. So we have a responsibility to play our part and our role in assisting Israel. It's not good enough to say that, you know, this is an old story, responsibility, aliyah. This is a story from the 60s, from
we have a problem.
Jews from the Arab lands, and then in later years from South Africa and Russia. I'm sorry, from Russia and Ethiopia. This is not an old story. It's still a story of today. Whilst Israel, we're blessed, we should be very, very proud that Israel is much stronger than it ever was. Of course, we're well aware of the military strength. We're well aware of the technology strength. Prior to COVID, the economy, the currency, unemployment, on any measure you would measure Israel, it comes out very, very, very good. Where Israel comes out very poorly on OECD standards is the inequality of the population. You have a massive poverty, you have massive youth poverty. The periphery of Israel has a socio-demographic profile far below that, particularly of Tel Aviv. And so it's really there's two Israels. And the projects that Boji spoke about in the first words of this conference was about Aliyah, was about Amigur, was about these youth villages, and helping those in need. And so that responsibility hasn't gone away. As strong as Israel is today, it will only remain what it is with the sense with the help of the diaspora. And as we've also spoken about today, you know, many of our communities around the world won't be strong unless they do that and keep this deep connection between Israel and the diaspora. And some of the issues we're speaking about in the United States are very much have those issues at the core. And then you start talking about education, trips, these type of things to keep it there and get it back. But I strongly believe and it's been ingrained in us from my parents. We try and do that with our children, and our closest friends are those who share that responsibility for Israel. There's no way we could live as we do here without that, and we need to play our part. And that need hasn't gone away. And I guess that's why I took on this job, was to make sure that Keren-Hayesod is strong, remains relevant. And I think that through the COVID crisis, the need for organisations, particularly Keren-Hayesod itself, will only come out with more understanding of that need and responsibility that it did going into the COVID crisis.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you both, not just for participating in this conversation today, but really for everything you do, within the Sochnut and Keren-Hayesod, but also for I think for us in Australia and me personally, that sense of being part of this broader Jewish world, it's extremely important to us. And, that it inspires us, it makes us stronger, that connectedness, and it's a constant reminder of that sense of responsibility that we all have as Jews, for those who can, to make a contribution to the Jewish world and the broader community as we do, and to share that with sort of the next generation and allow them to do it in their own way, in their own unique way, which they inevitably do, and as each of us have. So thank you very much. I'll pass back to Bren just to wrap up.
Thank you. It was also, for me, it's really great to appear. I mean, I had the pleasure, or always have the pleasure of working with you and your dads. And my dad had the pleasure of working with your dad. So I think we're all closing a circle of serving the Jewish people, and that serve it well.
I didn't think we'd torture the audience, but there are a lot of, I have to say, I was thinking before we went live, I was actually thinking, I only really got to know both of you in the last 18 months, but I feel a very strong bond as if we've known each other our entire lives. And maybe that's because we have long time links between all of us, but it certainly makes everything we do more enjoyable and more meaningful. So thank you both, and Bren, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Jeremy. Thanks, Buji.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
Thank you all. Tonight I learned a lot. I learned that David Ben-Gurion was in Australia, which for someone who has been involved in the Zionist endeavor for 2 odd decades, I'm quite surprised, and I never knew that before. I also learned that Abba Evan was Bushy's uncle, which again I didn't know. But more seriously, this conversation I think was really important. It shows that serious people are having serious discussions about the present and the future of the world's Jewish community. I think it shows that they're not afraid to tackle the challenges, and the fact that they've had these conversations in open forums means they're not afraid for everyone to be involved and to contribute their ideas to the future of both Israel and the world's Jewish communities. Look, please keep the conversation going in the comments section, and we will see you next week. Good night.